Imagine a world where one foolish decision could topple an empire. Hello, you are on the channel 33 Facts. Here we share amazing stories, scientific misconceptions, and unexplained facts. Get comfortable. Let's begin. First ruler, Pharnabazos III of Persia. This man inherited one of the most powerful positions in the ancient world, yet he managed to alienate every single ally his predecessors had cultivated. When Greek mercenaries offered their services, Pharnabazos refused them with insults, claiming Persians needed no foreign help. Within months, those same mercenaries joined his enemies. His arrogance cost Persia crucial battles in Asia Minor. The truly baffling part: Pharnabazos had witnessed his father successfully using Greek soldiers. He simply believed he knew better. His stubbornness led to territorial losses that Persia never fully recovered. Historians note that his reign marked the beginning of Persia's decline in the Western territories, all because one man refused to learn from proven strategies. But wait, there's more. Second ruler, Caracalla of Rome. This emperor is remembered for granting citizenship to all free men in the empire, which sounds progressive until you understand why. He needed more taxpayers. Caracalla's spending was legendary and catastrophic. He built massive baths in Rome that drained the treasury. He increased soldiers' pay without considering how to fund it. When advisors warned him about bankruptcy, he reportedly said he'd simply mint more coins. The result? Rampant inflation that crippled the Roman economy for decades. But here's what really captures his foolishness. Caracalla started a war with Parthia based on a marriage proposal he never intended to honor. He pretended to want peace, invited Parthian nobles to a wedding feast, then massacred them. This treachery united Parthia against Rome and created an enemy that would harass the empire's eastern borders for generations. And it gets more interesting. Third ruler, Xerxes of Persia. Most know him from the Battle of Thermopylae, but his greatest mistake came at sea. After the Greek fleet defeated his navy at Salamis, Xerxes did something extraordinary. He blamed the water. Ancient sources claim he ordered his soldiers to whip the Hellespont Strait 300 times as punishment for destroying his bridges during a storm. He branded the water with hot irons and threw chains into it as symbols of enslavement. While this might be symbolic rather than literal, it reveals a mindset that refused to acknowledge natural forces or human error. Resources spent on symbolic gestures could have rebuilt his fleet. His army watched their leader fight the ocean instead of the enemy. Now for the most curious part. Fourth ruler, Pyrrhus of Epirus, gave us the term Pyrrhic victory, and for good reason. This brilliant military tactician won battle after battle against Rome, but each victory cost him so many soldiers that he was slowly losing the war. After defeating the Romans at Asculum, someone congratulated him on his triumph. Pyrrhus reportedly replied that one more such victory would utterly undo him. The stunning part isn't just that he recognized the problem, but that he kept using the same costly tactics anyway. He believed his military genius would somehow overcome mathematics. It didn't. He returned to Epirus with a fraction of his original army, his Italian ambitions shattered. His campaigns achieved nothing permanent except demonstrating how winning battles doesn't always mean winning wars. And here's what's surprising. Fifth ruler, Cambyses II of Persia, invaded Egypt successfully, but then his judgment collapsed entirely. Ancient historians report that he stabbed the sacred Apis bull, mocked Egyptian gods, and opened ancient tombs to desecrate them. Whether these accounts are fully accurate or Egyptian propaganda, the result was real. Egypt became ungovernable. The local population refused to cooperate with Persian administration. Revolts erupted constantly. Cambyses had conquered Egypt militarily but lost it culturally by attacking everything Egyptians held sacred. His father Cyrus had succeeded by respecting local customs. Cambyses threw away that wisdom. Even worse, while dealing with Egyptian rebellions, he learned of a coup in Persia. Rushing home, he died under mysterious circumstances, possibly suicide, possibly infection from a sword wound. His disrespect for Egyptian religion created chaos that benefited no one. And that's not all. Sixth ruler, Belshazzar of Babylon, is famous for the writing on the wall, but the real story is even stranger. While Persian armies surrounded Babylon, Belshazzar threw a feast using sacred vessels stolen from the Jewish temple. This wasn't just arrogance, it was spectacular misjudgment. He was insulting the god of a significant minority population within his walls during a siege. That night, according to Daniel's account, mysterious writing appeared predicting Babylon's fall. Whether divine intervention or a psychological breaking point, Belshazzar's grip on reality had clearly shattered. He made no military preparations, posted insufficient guards, and left water gates inadequately defended. Persian forces diverted the Euphrates River and marched through the riverbed into the city. Babylon fell almost without resistance because its ruler was too busy partying with sacred artifacts to notice an invasion. And here is where it gets really strange. Seventh ruler, Mithridates. The sixth of Pontus was so paranoid about poisoning that he took small doses of various poisons to build immunity. This sounds clever until you consider the consequences. When Rome finally defeated him and he decided to commit suicide by poison, it didn't work. His immunity saved him from his own death attempt. According to Appian, he had to ask a guard to stab him because the poison had no effect. Decades of paranoid self-poisoning made it impossible for him to die on his own terms. But his greater mistake was fighting Rome across 6 separate wars. After each defeat, he'd rebuild and attack again, as if repetition would somehow change the outcome. He never adapted his strategy, never sought lasting peace, just kept throwing his kingdom against an enemy that grew stronger with each conflict. Let's dig deeper. Eighth ruler, Ptolemy. The fourth of Egypt inherited a prosperous kingdom and systematically destroyed it through laziness. While his ancestors built libraries and supported scholars, Ptolemy IV preferred wine and feasts. He appointed corrupt officials because they didn't disturb his pleasures with actual governance. When Syria attacked, his advisors practically dragged him to the Battle of Raphia. Egypt won, but only because his generals planned everything while Ptolemy focused on his next banquet. After the victory, he rushed back to Alexandria to celebrate instead of securing territorial gains. His neglect allowed conquered regions to slip away. Even more remarkably, he murdered his mother, his uncle, and his brother to eliminate anyone who might criticize his lifestyle. The dynasty never recovered from his indolence. His reign proved that you can destroy a civilization simply by ignoring it. Now pay attention. Ninth ruler, Commodus of Rome, believed he was Hercules reincarnated. This wasn't a metaphor, he genuinely thought he was a demigod. He renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana after himself and planned to rename all the months after his titles. He fought as a gladiator in the Colosseum, which horrified Roman sensibilities about imperial dignity. He didn't fight dangerous opponents, of course. His matches were rigged, and he killed exotic animals or disabled fighters. The Senate had to attend these spectacles and applaud enthusiastically or face execution. He charged Rome 1 million sesterces per appearance, bankrupting the treasury for theatrical performances. His advisors tried to manage the empire while their emperor played gladiator. The situation became so desperate that his closest associates conspired to kill him. They tried poison first, but when Commodus vomited it up, an athlete strangled him in his bath. His death was celebrated, and the Senate immediately declared damnatio memoriae, erasing his names from monuments. And then another detail emerges. 10th ruler, Elagabalus of Rome, became emperor at 14 and spent 4 years proving that adolescents shouldn't rule empires. He brought the cult of the Syrian sun god Elagabal to Rome and forced Romans to worship it as supreme over Jupiter. He married a Vestal virgin, breaking one of Rome's most sacred taboos. He supposedly married and divorced 5 women in 4 years, then married a male athlete in a public ceremony. Whether these accounts are exaggerated by hostile historians or not, the pattern is clear. Elagabalus deliberately violated every Roman tradition. He appointed favorites to crucial positions based on physical attributes rather than competence. He neglected military matters entirely while barbarians pressed the borders. The Praetorian Guard eventually murdered him and his mother, throwing their bodies into the Tiber River. He was 18 years old. The Senate erased his memory officially, but his reign became a cautionary tale about letting children rule. And here's what raises questions. 11th ruler, Darius III of Persia faced Alexander the Great 3 times and fled from battle 3 times. At Issus, he abandoned his family, his treasury, and his army to escape. At Gaugamela, he had numerical superiority and better defensive positions, yet when his center came under pressure, he fled again. His own nobles eventually murdered him because his cowardice was destroying Persia. But here's the puzzle. Darius wasn't incompetent in administration. He governed well during peacetime. He simply couldn't handle combat pressure. Some historians suggest he was placed on the throne precisely because he seemed controllable, not because he was qualified. Persian nobles wanted a weak king they could manipulate. They got one, but then discovered that a weak king against Alexander was no king at all. Darius's flight at Gaugamela effectively ended Persian independence. One man's inability to stand firm in battle dissolved an empire that had lasted over 2 centuries. But there is another version. 12th ruler, Valerian of Rome holds a unique distinction. He's the only Roman emperor captured alive by an enemy. In 260, Valerian marched against the Sassanid Persians with a large army. He was in his 60s and apparently not thinking clearly. When Shapur I offered to negotiate, Valerian walked into what was obviously a trap. The Persians captured him instantly. According to some accounts, Shapur used Valerian as a footstool when mounting his horse, displaying the captured emperor to humiliate Rome. Other sources claim Valerian was forced to swallow molten gold and then stuffed and displayed as a trophy. These details might be propaganda, but the capture itself is undeniable. Valerian's mistake wasn't just tactical. He had left his son Gallienus to manage the Western Empire, but took the strongest legions east, leaving Rome vulnerable. His capture triggered 20 years of crisis, barbarian invasions, and civil wars. One emperor's gullibility nearly destroyed Rome. The next point is no less amazing. 13th ruler, Nebuchadnezzar III of Babylon is often confused with his famous predecessor, but this later Nebuchadnezzar was merely a rebel pretender. When Darius I of Persia took power, this man claimed to be the legitimate Nebuchadnezzar returned. He convinced enough Babylonians that Darius had to besiege the city. The pretender's mistake was believing walls alone would save him. He didn't stockpile enough food. He didn't secure water sources properly. He trusted that rebellion would spread to other Persian provinces, but it didn't. After months, Babylon starved while Persian forces remained well supplied. The pretender tried to sneak out but was captured. Darius displayed him publicly, then impaled him. This Nebuchadnezzar's foolishness wasn't claiming a throne, it was doing so without adequate preparation. He gambled everything on hope rather than logistics. And here a new story appears. 14th ruler, Antiochus IV. Epiphanes of the Seleucid Empire called himself God Manifest and tried to Hellenize Judea by force. He banned Jewish religious practices, desecrated the temple by sacrificing pigs, and installed a statue of Zeus. This wasn't just religious intolerance, it was strategic stupidity. Judea was already difficult to govern, with strong local traditions and religious identity. Attacking those traditions guaranteed revolt. The Maccabean rebellion erupted, and Antiochus suddenly faced a guerrilla war he couldn't win. He'd turned a manageable province into a constant drain on resources. Even worse, while fighting in Judea, he neglected the eastern provinces. The Parthians sensed weakness and began pushing west. Antiochus died during a campaign, possibly from disease, possibly from madness. Ancient sources disagree. His forced Hellenization accomplished nothing except weakening his empire and creating enemies. The Seleucid Empire never recovered its former strength. Let's move on. 15th ruler, Perdiccas of Macedon served as regent after Alexander's death and immediately began making terrible decisions. When Alexander's officers divided the empire at Babylon, Perdiccas received the role of overall guardian. This meant nothing without military force, but Perdiccas acted as if his title gave him actual power. He tried to control generals who commanded their own armies. He attempted to block marriages between rival successors and prominent families. Every move alienated potential allies. When he invaded Egypt to assert authority over Ptolemy, his army had to cross the Nile. Perdiccas chose a dangerous ford. His soldiers drowned in large numbers, and crocodiles attacked stragglers. The survivors were furious. Perdiccas' own officers murdered him in his tent. He'd been regent for less than 3 years. His incompetence accelerated the breakup of Alexander's empire into warring kingdoms. And here's what's really interesting. 16th ruler Artaxerxes III of Persia was actually a competent military leader who reconquered Egypt and stabilized Persian borders. So why does he appear here? Because he was so busy fighting external enemies that he ignored internal dangers completely. He never noticed that his closest advisor, Bagoas the eunuch, was accumulating dangerous power. Bagoas poisoned Artaxerxes and most of his sons, then placed a puppet on the throne. This puppet, Artaxerxes IV, tried to assert independence, so Bagoas poisoned him too. Then Bagoas elevated Darius III, who finally killed Bagoas before being killed himself. Artaxerxes III's mistake was focusing solely on external threats, while allowing a single courtier to control the palace. His military successes became meaningless when that oversight destroyed the dynasty from within. 4 Persian kings died in rapid succession because one effective ruler never bothered to watch his back. The next detail may surprise you. 17th ruler, Tarquin the Proud, the last king of Rome, destroyed monarchy for Romans forever. He was competent in warfare and building projects, constructing sewers and temples. But he treated the Senate with contempt, executed nobles without trial, and ruled as a tyrant. The breaking point came when his son Sextus raped Lucretia, wife of a prominent noble. She committed suicide after reporting the crime. This single act of violence triggered revolution. The nobles expelled the entire Tarquin family and established the Republic. Tarquin spent years trying to regain power, allying with other Latin cities and even the Etruscan Lars Porsena. Nothing worked. Romans were so traumatized by his tyranny that they made king a forbidden title. They designed their republic specifically to prevent anyone from accumulating royal power. Tarquin's legacy was teaching Romans that monarchy itself was dangerous. His personal arrogance and his son's crime ended kingship in Rome for 5 centuries. If you enjoy our videos about amazing facts, myths, and bold debunking of lies, support us with a like and write the number 1 in the comments. If not, write 0. This way we'll understand what interests you and make our episodes even better. But there is a nuance. 18th ruler, Phocas of the Byzantine Empire, was a centurion who murdered his way to power. When Emperor Maurice tried to negotiate with Avars instead of paying ransom for captured Roman soldiers, the army mutinied. They proclaimed Phocas emperor, and he murdered Maurice and his entire family, including children. He was 50 years old and had no experience governing. His reign was 8 years of disasters. He couldn't defend borders. The Persians invaded and conquered Roman provinces. The Avars pushed to Constantinople's walls. Internally, Phocas dealt with opposition through mass executions. He burned people alive on suspicion of disloyalty. The bureaucracy stopped functioning because officials were too afraid to make decisions. Finally, the Exarch of Carthage sent a fleet. Phocas was captured, mutilated, and executed. His body was burned and his ashes scattered. Those 8 years reversed decades of Byzantine recovery. His incompetence cost the empire territories it would take generations to reclaim, if ever. And here's another example. 19th ruler. Heliogabalus is sometimes called Elagabalus, and we mentioned him before, but his story deserves deeper examination. Ancient historians, particularly Cassius Dio, describe behaviors so bizarre they strain credibility. Supposedly, he prostituted himself in the palace, standing in doorways like a common worker. He reportedly appeared in public wearing full makeup, wigs and women's clothing at official ceremonies. He held banquets where guests sat on inflatable cushions that slowly deflated, lowering them below table level. He released lions, leopards, and bears amongst sleeping dinner guests. Some historians argue these accounts are exaggerated character assassination by hostile senators, but even if partially true, they reveal an emperor completely disconnected from Roman expectations of dignitas. Whether mad, rebellious, or misunderstood, Heliogabalus made it impossible for anyone to take his rule seriously. That alone was fatal in a world where emperors survived through projected strength. It's time to move on. 20th ruler, Shi Huangdi of China doesn't fit the pattern of pure foolishness. He unified China, standardized writing, built the Great Wall, but his mistakes were monumental. He burned books to control thought, burying scholars alive who protested. He forced millions into labor projects with no regard for cost in human lives. His paranoia about assassination led him to sleep in different rooms each night, trust no one, and execute officials on suspicion. He died searching for an immortality elixir, possibly poisoned by the mercury-based potions he consumed regularly. After his death, the Qin dynasty collapsed within years despite his careful planning. Why? Because he'd executed everyone capable of governing and alienated every social class. His son was murdered, rebels arose everywhere, and the dynasty he thought would last 10,000 years ended in 15 years total. Shi Huangdi achieved remarkable things but destroyed them through brutality and paranoia. Here hides an important point. 21st ruler Justinian II of Byzantium is known as Justinian Rhinometus because his nose was cut off. He was deposed once, had his nose slit to disqualify him from ruling, and was exiled. Most people would accept this fate. Justinian spent a decade plotting revenge. He escaped exile, sought help from Bulgar tribes, and invaded Constantinople. Somehow he regained the throne despite his mutilation, which was supposed to be disqualifying. His second reign was even more tyrannical than his first. He executed everyone he suspected of disloyalty during his exile. He blinded enemies. He destroyed his own tax base through confiscations. The population lived in terror. After 6 more years, another coup overthrew him, and this time they made sure they beheaded him and killed his son. Justinian's mistake was believing that regaining power through ruthlessness would somehow lead to stable rule. Instead, his revenge-driven second reign weakened Byzantium further and proved that determination without wisdom is just stubbornness. And here's what is usually not mentioned. 22nd ruler, Attalus III of Pergamon had one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the Hellenistic world. He was a cultured man interested in medicine, botany, and sculpture. But he had no heir and no plan for succession. When he died in 133 BCE, his will left the entire kingdom of Pergamon to Rome. Not to a relative, not to a trusted general, to a foreign power. Historians still debate why. Some suggest he wanted to prevent civil war. Others propose he hoped Roman protection would preserve his kingdom's culture. The result? Rome annexed Pergamon as the province of Asia. The kingdom ceased to exist. Attalus' subjects became Roman taxpayers. Whatever his reasoning, Attalus gave away an entire kingdom through a will, eliminating his people's independence without war or conquest. It's possibly the strangest decision any ancient ruler ever made. One signature ended a dynasty and a kingdom. There is a continuation. 23rd ruler, Shapur. The third of the Sassanid Empire inherited a stable realm and did almost nothing with it. He ruled for 5 years and made virtually no decisions. This might seem harmless, but inaction is its own form of failure. Regional governors began acting independently. The army's discipline weakened without clear leadership. Nomadic tribes tested borders without facing organized resistance. When Shapur died, possibly poisoned, his brother inherited a realm that looked intact but had been hollowed out by neglect. The fascinating aspect of Shapur III is that he's barely mentioned in sources. He did so little that historians have almost nothing to say about him. In a way, that's more damning than spectacular failure. He held absolute power and used it for nothing. His legacy is absence itself. And now, a fact that is rarely discussed. 24th ruler. Caracalla appears again, but from a different angle. Beyond his economic foolishness, he murdered his brother Geta, not in battle or political coup, but in their mother's arms. Julia Domna tried to reconcile her sons, calling them both to her apartments for peace negotiations. Caracalla had soldiers waiting. They burst in and killed Geta while he clung to their mother. Julia was splattered with her younger son's blood. Then Caracalla ordered damnatio memoriae against his brother, erasing Geta from all monuments and records. He killed anyone who mourned Geta, including friends and supporters, totaling thousands. This wasn't political necessity. Both brothers could have ruled separate parts of the empire, as co-emperors often did. Caracalla chose fratricide from paranoia and power hunger. The psychological damage to Roman political culture was immense. If an emperor would murder his brother in his mother's embrace, who was safe? The Severan dynasty never recovered from this trauma. From this moment, the most interesting part begins. 25th ruler. Emperor Gaozu of Han China, also known as Liu Bang, is generally considered a founder rather than a fool. But in his later years, he made a catastrophic mistake regarding succession. He wanted to replace his designated heir, the son of Empress Lu, with a son from his favorite concubine, Lady Qi. The problem? His empress was politically savvy and ruthless, while Lady Qi had only personal charm. When ministers opposed changing the succession, Liu Bang wavered instead of decisively choosing one path. This indecision was fatal, not for him, but for Lady Qi and her son. After Liu Bang died, Empress Lu acted immediately. She mutilated Lady Qi horrifically, cutting off her limbs, blinding her, and keeping her alive in this state as a human pig. She forced Liu Bang's son by Lady Qi to see his mother in this condition, then poisoned him. Lu then ruled through puppet emperors for years. Liu Bang's inability to make a clear succession decision led directly to this horror. Strong leadership requires choosing and committing, not wavering between options. And then an unexpected twist. 26th ruler. Romulus Augustulus was the last Western Roman emperor, though calling him a ruler overstates his role. He was 14 when his father, the general Orestes, deposed the previous emperor and installed his son. Romulus had no power, no support, and no legitimacy. Within months, Germanic general Odoacer marched on Ravenna. Orestes fled and was captured and executed. Odoacer entered the capital and found a teenage boy sitting on the throne. Odoacer felt sorry for him. Instead of execution, he gave Romulus a pension and sent him to live with relatives in Campania. The Western Roman Empire ended not with battle or siege, but with a general politely retiring a child emperor. Romulus's mistake was being placed in an impossible situation by his ambitious father. But his inclusion here represents how weakness at the top, even through no fault of the individual, can symbolize systemic collapse. Rome fell because someone thought a teenager could command legions. This moment changes everything. 27th ruler. Cleopatra. Selene II of Mauritania doesn't fit the pattern of male rulers, but her father, Ptolemy XV, Caesarion, does. Caesarion was Julius Caesar's son with Cleopatra VII. When Mark Antony and Cleopatra died, Octavian captured Caesarion. Advisors told Octavian, 2 Caesars are too many. Octavian had the 17-year-old executed. Caesarion's mistake was simply existing, but it illustrates a harsh reality. Being heir to someone too powerful can be fatal. Caesarion could have fled Egypt. Some evidence suggests he tried to escape to India, but turned back. That decision cost him everything. The lesson here isn't about governance, but survival. Sometimes the wisest choice is abandoning claims to power entirely. Caesarion clung to his identity as Caesar's son when anonymity would have saved his life. Let's look at the next point. 28th ruler. Honorius of the Western Roman Empire watched his empire collapse while worrying about chickens. When Rome was sacked by Visigoths in 410, a courtier brought news to Ravenna. Honorius reportedly panicked, crying, "But I just fed her." He was talking about his favorite chicken, which he'd named Roma. When clarified that the city of Rome had fallen, he supposedly said with relief, "Oh, I thought you meant my bird." This anecdote might be apocryphal, but it captures Honorius's complete disconnect from reality. While barbarians carved up his empire, he hid in the marshes of Ravenna, protected by walls and indifference. He executed his best general, Stilicho, on false charges of treason. He ignored Britain's call for help, leading to permanent Roman withdrawal. He did nothing as Gaul, Spain, and Africa slipped away. Honorius reigned for 28 years and spent them powerless and oblivious. Weak leadership doesn't just fail to prevent disaster, it often accelerates it. Let's move forward. 29th ruler. Glycerius became Western Roman emperor in 473. But calling him a ruler is generous. He was a puppet installed by the Germanic general Gundobad. He had no army, no treasury, and no legitimacy. Julius Nepos, backed by Eastern Roman forces, arrived in 474. Glycerius surrendered without fight and retired to become a bishop. He was emperor for less than a year and is barely mentioned in sources. Why include him? Because he represents the ultimate in powerless authority, someone who accepted a crown knowing it meant nothing. Rome by this point was a title without substance, an empire that existed on paper while barbarian kingdoms controlled the actual territory. Glycerius's acceptance of this farce, his willingness to wear empty robes for a year, symbolizes how badly Roman imperial dignity had degraded. He chose to be a placeholder rather than risk refusing powerful generals. Now, what is often hidden. 30th ruler Olybrius became emperor in 472 through the influence of the Vandal king Genseric, whose family Olybrius had married into. He ruled for 7 months before dying, possibly from plague. During his brief reign, the Visigothic general Ricimer and the Germanic general Gundobad fought each other. Olybrius was emperor while German generals decided Rome's fate. He issued no laws, commanded no armies, and changed nothing. His entire reign was Germans using a Roman figurehead to legitimize their power struggles. Olybrius's mistake was accepting the purple when the position had become purely ceremonial. He could have declined and lived peacefully as a wealthy senator. Instead, he agreed to be a puppet and died stressed and powerless. Sometimes the wise choice is refusing promotion when it comes with impossible conditions. And here's another detail worth noting. 31st ruler. Libius Severus ruled the Western Roman Empire from 461 to 465. He was installed by Ricimer, the Germanic general who really controlled Rome. The Eastern Empire refused to recognize Severus, leaving him isolated. He couldn't appoint generals without Ricimer's approval. He couldn't make treaties without permission. When he died, possibly poisoned by Ricimer, no one mourned him. Severus's inclusion demonstrates how acceptance of powerlessness becomes collaboration in one's own irrelevance. He could have attempted to build independent power, to reach out to Eastern emperors, to cultivate loyal followers. Instead, he settled into comfortable impotence. That choice made him complicit in Rome's continued decline. We approach the end. 32nd ruler, Majorian was actually competent, which makes his inclusion here different. He became Western Emperor in 457 and immediately tried to restore Roman power. He built a fleet to retake Africa from the Vandals. He reformed the army. He issued laws to protect taxpayers from corrupt officials. He was assassinated by Ricimer after 5 years. Why does he appear in this list? Because his mistake was trusting Ricimer. He thought that by working with the power behind the throne, he could gradually reassert imperial authority. He didn't understand that Ricimer preferred weak emperors. The moment Majorian showed competence, he became dangerous. His murder taught any future emperor that effectiveness was fatal. Majorian's tragedy proves that good intentions and competent leadership mean nothing without power to back them. He was Rome's last real attempt at Western imperial revival, killed by the system he tried to save. And finally, 33rd ruler, Nepos was the last Western Roman emperor to rule from Rome itself. He was installed in 474 with Eastern Empire support, but fled within a year when Orestes rebelled. Nepos spent the rest of his life in Dalmatia, claiming he was still emperor while Romulus Augustulus sat in Ravenna. After Odoacer deposed Romulus, Nepos technically became emperor again, at least in legal theory. He ruled over nothing except his Dalmatian estate. Finally, his own soldiers murdered him in 480. Nepos's mistake was clinging to a title that had lost all meaning. He could have acknowledged reality, negotiated with barbarian kingdoms, found a role in the new world. Instead, he insisted he was emperor of an empire that no longer existed. He died for a fiction. It's perhaps the most fitting end to Roman imperial pretensions. A murdered exile claiming dominion over nothing. So what can we conclude from these 33 examples? Foolishness in ancient rulers took many forms. Some were actively destructive like Caracalla or Commodus. Others were passively negligent like Shapur III or Honorius. Some made single catastrophic decisions like Belshazzar or Darius III. Others accumulated small failures that compounded over time like Ptolemy IV. What's consistent is the disconnect between power and wisdom. These men held absolute authority yet lacked judgment, foresight, or basic common sense. Many destroyed themselves, more destroyed their empires. The historical record preserves their failures as warnings, though whether later generations learned from them is questionable. Each age produces its own fools in power, wearing different crowns, but making similar mistakes. What remains uncertain is whether these rulers were truly uniquely incompetent or simply visible examples of human weakness amplified by authority. Ancient sources often exaggerate, vilify enemies, and simplify complex situations. Perhaps some of these men faced impossible circumstances and are remembered unfairly. Or perhaps absolute power really does reveal character clearly, and these 33 simply reveal themselves to be unequal to their positions. History doesn't answer that question conclusively. It only shows us the results: collapsed empires, murdered rulers, and cautionary tales that span millennia. The pattern that emerges from these 33 rulers reveals something deeper about power itself. Intelligence, education, and even good intentions matter little when paired with fatal character flaws. Pharnabazus had his father's example but chose arrogance. Majorian had competence but lacked caution. Attalus had wisdom but no vision for continuity. What united them was an inability to see beyond immediate circumstances, to understand that today's decisions create tomorrow's consequences. The emperors who played gladiator, the kings who whipped oceans, the rulers who trusted obvious enemies, they all shared a disconnection from reality that their power insulated rather than corrected. No advisors could save them because they wouldn't listen. No armies could protect them because they made enemies unnecessarily. Their mistakes weren't inevitable products of their times, but personal failures amplified to historical scale. The truly unsettling aspect is how many of these men had predecessors who succeeded using opposite approaches. They had models of effective leadership right in their own dynasties, yet chose differently, as if convinced that their unique genius exempted them from learning. Perhaps the greatest lesson isn't about any individual ruler, but about systems that concentrate power without accountability. When one person's whims become law, their foolishness becomes everyone's catastrophe. Millions suffered because Commodus wanted to play Hercules. Entire provinces burned because Antiochus couldn't tolerate religious difference. Dynasties ended because Artaxerxes ignored palace intrigue. These weren't just personal tragedies, but systemic failures that destroyed the lives of countless people who never made these decisions. The soldiers who drowned crossing the Nile for Perdiccas, the scholars buried alive by Shi Huangdi, the citizens massacred in Phocas's paranoid purges. They were victims of leadership structures that gave absolute power to individuals utterly unprepared for it. Ancient civilizations lacked mechanisms to remove incompetent rulers peacefully. Once crowned, a fool could reign until death or violent overthrow. This created cycles of destruction that modern historians can trace, but ancient peoples could only endure. The question remains whether contemporary systems have truly solved this problem or merely disguised it better. Thank you for watching 33 Facts. If these stories of ancient rulers and their catastrophic mistakes intrigued you, subscribe to our channel for more fascinating journeys through history's strangest moments. Until next time, stay curious.